So this is
Now you have E
day
string root
8
minor shape.
of learning how to play the
Same thing,
guitar.
just a minor chord. Then we move to the A string
I
root
was
minor
sick,
shape,
so
which is still a minor
that's
chord, but now
why
the root's on
there's
the
a
A
delay
string. And then
in
there's
some
the E
days.
string root
But
major
now
shape.
I'm back.
Major chord, root on the A string.
I'm back.
So that's how you play them, but how do you use
I'm
bar chords
back.
to actually move yourself closer to being able to play all chords? To answer that, I have to explain why I've been referring to these as bar chord shapes instead of just bar chords. The reason is because bar chord shapes, unlike open chords, are actually movable. So if we take our E string root major shape, for example, like I just showed you, this is an A major chord because the root here is an A. But unlike open chords, there's no open strings tying this shape to this position. So we can move this around, we can move this up. In this case, this would be a B major chord because now the lowest note, the root, is B. We can move it all the way down here. Now the lowest note is F, be an F major chord. The fact that all four of the bar chord shapes are movable in this exact same way unlocks a ton of new chords for us that weren't available as open chords. G major was available as an open chord, but what about
Alright,
G
let's
sharp?
start.
There's no G sharp major open chord, but we can play that as a bar chord. If you
As a
really think about it, you
barcode,
break
where
it
is
down,
my
the
pick?
4 bar chord shapes that we learned unlock 48 unique chords.
I
that we
had
can
my
play now.
pick
There's 12
somewhere.
unique notes on each string. We can play a minor chord and a major chord for each one of those notes. You multiply that by 2 strings, you have 48 new chords you can play. So at this point, you might be making the mistake of thinking that that's it.
Got
you
it.
can play major and minor chords
Got
that
it.
correspond to every single note, but there's still a little bit more to go. You still have to learn
I think I should
level
add
3,
some lighting.
7th chords. This is the level where chord names start to look more like industrial part numbers than music. 7th chords are a kind of bar chord. They're a little bit more complex, which is why they're next in the learning progression, and they only have one important difference from all the
Got
other
my
chords.
guitar ready.
The difference is that 7th chords are made up of 4 notes, whereas everything we've been playing so far is only
So
made up
let's
of 3
start.
notes, which sounds confusing, but it's really not. Basically, to build any chord, all you do is take the 1st, 3rd, and 5th note of the corresponding scale, musician, and play any song I wanted. It wasn't until I understood that there's only 5 different kinds of chords that my playing really changed. In this video, we're going to cover these 5 categories in order of difficulty so you can not only build a complete chord vocabulary, but also so you have a defined learning progression that you can follow to improve your chord playing. Let's start at level 1. Level 1 is all about open chords. When you're first starting, there are 7 essential open chords you've got to master. We're going to walk through it really quickly, but if you want a more in-depth tutorial for how to play anything in this video, check out the links in the description. I want this video to mostly stay focused on giving you the order to learn stuff and explaining that order. Your first starter pack of chords on guitar should include E major, E minor, A major, A minor, G major, C major, and D major. So that's how you play them. And I know it probably feels like I just threw 7 random chords at you, but there are 2 good reasons we learn these 7 chords first out of anything. The first reason is the surface level reason, and that's that you learn 7 chords that you didn't know before. So if a song calls for a C major, for example, you can now play a C major chord. The second and more important reason we learn these 7 first is because of the shapes you put your hand in to play these chords. The more you understand guitar, the more you're going to realize that all other chord shapes are based on these 7 shapes. And because literally every other chord is just a modification of these 7 chords, you've got to master these before you move on to level 2, bar chords. Let's open level 2 by explaining how bar chords and open chords from level 1 are different. Open chords are called that because they involve open strings. So for any open chord, there's going to be some unfretted open strings ringing out. Bar chords are not like that. With bar chords, every single note is fretted. The way we accomplish that is by taking our first finger and making a bar at a certain fret. Like for example, I'm on the 5th fret here, I'll make a bar. Then I can add a chord shape on top of that to create a bar chord. Just like before, we're going to fly through the chord shapes. If you want a super granular tutorial, that video will be linked.
That
Hi
tutorial
guys,
is
my name's Andy, and in this lesson
saying
I'm taking
everything
you through the
except
7 basic open
playing the chords.
And these should be the first chords that you learn if you're learning guitar for the first time, or maybe if it's the first time in a long time. These chords are in the same order as I teach them in my free beginners course, available at andyguitar.co.uk, where we've got heaps of real song lessons, taking you from absolute beginner, going right through to having a repertoire that you will be proud to play in front of your friends. Now we're going to start off with the E major chord. This is the first chord that I would teach any of my beginner students if they were in a private lesson. And I'm going to show you where to put your fingers for each one of these chords. So we're going to have your first finger in the area of the first fret, which is this area here, on the third string, which is 1, 2, 3, right there. And then we're going to have your middle finger on the second fret of the fifth string, and we're numbering the strings from bottom to top, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right here. And then your third finger needs to squash in directly underneath your middle one, like this, at the same fret, but that's on the fourth string. And then if we press down with your fingers, tips at a 90-degree angle, and we leave plenty of space here, so that we're not touching the bottom of the guitar, that should ring out really great. Now these chords are called open chords because they include open strings. So we need to make sure that these open strings,
No numbing.
specifically these strings too, are ringing out by not touching them with the underneath of your first finger or the palm of your hand here. It's really important that you get this first chord in really good form because it sets you up to be able to do all the rest of these chords, which we're going to learn from this E, because our second chord is the A chord, and I'm going to change from it by doing this. This is our A major chord. Now what we did was, when we were on the first chord, we keep our first finger down, and we're going to call that our anchor finger. And we're going to slide that just over the metal strip that goes down over that metal fret, but keeping on the same string so it never actually lifts off. And we're going to move your middle finger just above at the same fret, but on the string directly above. Then your third finger directly underneath your middle one, like this, at the same fret, but that's on the fourth string. And then if we press down with your fingers, tips at a 90-degree angle, and we leave plenty of space here so that we're not touching the bottom of the guitar, that should ring out really great. Now these chords are called open chords because they include open strings. So we need to make sure that these open strings, specifically these thinnest two, are ringing out by not touching them with the underneath of your first finger or the palm of your hand here. It's really important that you get this first chord in really good form because it sets you up to be able to do all the rest of these chords, which we're going to learn from this E, because our second chord is the A chord, and I'm going to change from it by doing this. This is our A major chord. Now what we did was, when we were on the first chord, we keep our first finger down, and we're going to call that our anchor finger. And we're going to slide that just over the metal strip that goes down over that metal fret, but keeping on the same string so it never actually lifts off. And we're going to move your middle finger just above at the same fret, but on the string directly above. And then your third finger goes directly below that string which your first finger is on. So essentially we've got 1, 2, 3, if we're learning this chord afresh. Now, because this is the second chord we've done, we actually need to strum it from the fifth string here, from the next string down. And that makes sure that we've got the lowest note as an A, because this is the A chord. Now, these first two chords are in line with level 1 of my beginner's course, and that level is all about mastering the change between the E and the A by keeping that first finger down and sliding over. The next chord we're going to learn is the D chord. So this chord, again, we can keep our first finger exactly where it is at the same fret, but it would be great if we could move it this way just a little bit, because when we're at this side of the fret, everything rings out a little sweeter than it does at this side of the fret. Everything sounds better when we're just here. And this is our D chord, a very bright, happy sounding chord. And we have your first finger, again where I said before. We've got your middle finger on the second fret of the first string, and then we make a little triangle shape by having our third finger at the third fret of the second string here. So 1, 2, and 3. And then we strum from the third string from the thickest one, because that is the open D string. So E, A, D, and they're our first 3 chords. Nice and logical. To check that these chords are ringing out great, you'll want to do a strum with them.
Damn.
And then pick
Damn.
each individual string. And then do a final strum. So strum, pick, and strum. That way we're checking that there are no strings that sound a little bit like this. Okay, so if we've got any strings here that aren't ringing out for you, a great tip is to make sure you're on the tips of your fingers. You want to be right at 90-degree angle. And you want to make sure that none of your fingers are hitting the string underneath, and we're allowing a little bit of room, as I say, not touching the bottom of your guitar. And it's E, A, and D chords that make up level 2 of my beginner's course. The next chord we're going to go for is a G major chord, and it's played like this. Now there's a couple of variations of this G chord. I call this a big G. It can also be played like this, but I find it's best in the context that we're going to use it with the songs that you'll want to learn with these open chords, that we go for the 4-fingered G chord, which is also called a big G, because it's easier to change to the D chord, which is a really common change, G to a D, by keeping that third finger down. So we've got the G chord, which is the new one, and then the D chord. You can see that third finger is now the anchor. And in fact, we can go from all these 4 chords, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we never actually lifted off all of our fingers from the fretboard. We've always got one finger, we've always got that contact on the fretboard, which I think is really important and really helps your changes. So for our G chord, we have your first finger at second fret of the 5th string, middle finger 3rd fret of the 6th string, the thickest one, and then it's a bit more of a stretch for your 3rd and little finger, which are both at G major all the time. But the next 2 chords we're covering are minor chords. Now these are C chords, and if music is an expression of emotion, we kind of need the happy pad, and it's the mix things sound really good. And these chords are actually, if anything, a little bit easier than a couple of the other ones. The first one of which is probably the easiest. This is the E minor chord, which I encourage the first 2 fingers. So we have your first finger at the 5th fret of the 2nd string, and then your middle finger directly leaving the thickest E string, because again this is E chord. You can play with other fingering, so your middle 2 fingers, but I prefer your first 2 fingers. Then we've got an anchor finger between the G and that E minor. So again, we can go through all our chords. The next one is the A minor, and this is the chord. Now this one's so easy because it's actually the same shape as the first chord that we learned, which was the E major. So this is our E major chord. But get this, if you move this down a string, it's suddenly a whole of a different chord, and it sounds sad. And remember, we want to strum from our open A string, not strum that thickest E note, because this is an A chord, so we still strum from that open A string. There aren't too many songs that use just minor chords, but there are a few, and they make up level 4 of my beginner's course. The final chord we're going to go for in this lesson is a C major chord. Now this was actually the first chord that my older brother taught me when I was around 9 or 10, and it's a little bit more of a stretch, so it's not ideal for an absolute beginner, but it is really commonly used. And this is our C major chord. So we got 2 fingers where they were actually on the A minor chord. First finger, 1st fret of the 2nd string. Middle finger on the 4th string, 2nd fret. and third finger, bit of a stretch, third fret of the 5th string. So we have 1, 2, 3. Give it a strum, pick each individual string, and strum again. Now, a great thing to remember with this C chord in particular, which can be quite tricky for a lot of people, is to have your fingers on this angle. So if you're going for this chord and plenty of others, and have your fingers vertical along with the frets, so in line with the frets going down, you're going to find it a real struggle. It's going to be a real stretch for your hand, which will feel very unnatural for you. Now, if we put our hands on this angle, so everything, all your fingers are basically curled up and pointing towards yourself, you'll find it a much more comfortable grip for your hand.
I don't know,
And it
man.
can,
Am I
in
learning a
time,
foreign language?
become
'Cause
second nature.
this is
Back
clearly
on
not
again. 1,
what he's saying.
2, 3, and this is our C chord, which we would strum from string 5 all the way down. So if you were able to follow that video and play each one of those chords as we went through them, then you've done a really great job. I really can't undersell that. That's really fantastic.
Thanks.
No matter if you found that an easy or a difficult exercise, the actual test for this and the way you want to practice it is exactly the same. And it comes down to the changes between the chords, as well as just learning each one of them in turn, remembering the names and so forth. But the real trick to nailing these chords is getting your fingers to remember where to go more instinctively, having that muscle memory, and being able to get the changes between the chords, not just the chords themselves. So every one of those chords, as I say, we can change through them by keeping one finger down as we go. There's the E chord. We keep our first finger down and change to the A. We keep our first finger down again and change to the D. We keep our third finger down this time, and we change to the G. We keep the first finger down and change to E minor. We keep the middle finger down and change to A minor. And we keep the first 2 fingers down to change to the C chord. So we were able to get through all 7 chords without having to lift off all your fingers at once. Now that is a way more, advanced exercise than you want to be going for if you're still trying to remember all the basic chord names. But this video is something that you can always refer back to and try and see where you are with that exercise. It's really, really able to do that you can go for songs with all those chords in there. If you find that you can only songs that just have E, A, and D in it, and then practice the
E,
chords
A, and D
themselves
in it.
until you're ready, until your fingers have
Thank you
memorized
guys.
those
Bye.
shapes and they're ringing out great. So at each stage when I went through those chords there, we have those levels
and
of my
string.
beginner's chord.